In the last week of college basketball, I have to start the show with Kansas winning their fourth NCAA title, bringing it back to Allen Fieldhouse. What a crazy game. I'm sure you all watched or heard on Monday night, the national championship game between Kansas and North Carolina. And today's episode is with my buddy, Jimmy Estruch, and he's a huge college basketball fan, grew up around the Syracuse program, and he's also a sports card collector. But because it's the last week of college basketball, I wanted to at least talk about the national championship game before we get to my episode with him. The largest comeback in national championship history, 16-point deficit for Kansas to overcome the lead that North Carolina had, and Kansas eventually won the national championship 72-69. It actually really was the largest comeback in national championship history. Pretty amazing when you think about it. There's so many factors here, right? You had North Carolina, who not only spoiled Coach K's last game at Cameron Indoor with all the legendary former players there to support him, they crushed that dream. And then they've never met in the tournament before, which is weird. Of course, why would the committee ever put them against each other? Yeah, that's a whole nother debate for another day. But Carolina Duke had never met in March Madness before. They finally did in the Final Four. The stage was set for Coach K to have the storybook ending. Everyone thought he was going to go out with a national championship, and it was all set for him. Nope. Back-to-back times they played, Carolina crushes the Duke dreams. And if you're a Duke hater, this is as good as it gets. Now, I'm not a huge Duke hater, but was it kind of cool to see North Carolina, the bitter rival, take out Duke and Coach K? A little bit. It was kind of cool. Obviously, you want everybody to ride off into the sunset, but Coach K, multiple national championships, multiple, All-Americans, tons of NBA players. The dude was at Duke for 42 years. Enough is enough. So it was kind of cool to see North Carolina play spoiler to Coach K. And they're an 8 seed, right? Hubert Davis is in his first full year as head coach, replacing Roy Williams, the legend. And this was the Roy Williams National Championship, right? Kansas, where he was before North Carolina, and then he went to UNC. So this was Roy Williams, 2 schools going against each other. And let's be real, nobody wants to be the guy that follows the guy. So Roy Williams is a freaking legend, and Hubert Davis comes in as a rookie. North Carolina is the 8th seed in the tournament, and they get to the championship. Not supposed to happen, right? 8 seeds don't really make it that often. Carolina was trying to be only the second 8 seed to win the national championship in March Madness. Some of you may remember the 1985 Villanova team who ended up winning it all as an 8 seed. But this doesn't happen, right? Normally 8 seeds don't get to the championship. And just the way that they got there, beating Duke to get to the finals. And then, Kansas had a pretty easy road for the most part, right? Not a real tough challenge. And speaking of Villanova, Kansas manhandled Villanova in the Final Four matchup that they had. It was all set up for Kansas. And if I remember correctly, I picked Gonzaga to beat Kansas in the final. Obviously a lot of teams were moved out of the way and it wasn't as tough of a road. So Kansas had a really good look at it. And to erase a 16-point deficit in a national championship game with college kids in a crazy atmosphere like the Superdome, which is a football stadium in New Orleans, man, huge props to them. Bill Self hasn't won a championship in 14 years. If you remember 2008 with Mario Chalmers, and they ended up beating Coach Calipari, Derrick Rose, in Memphis. That was the last time Kansas won. So, and also Bill Self, as you know, was one of those names linked to some recruiting violations. There was an investigation going on. There was lots of stuff happening. He never really got punished, and he kind of skated under the radar. Maybe with all this name, image, likeness, NIL stuff, it's going to be less and less. But it's crazy how within the last few years, his name was coming up in those discussions, and now he's hoisting a national championship trophy. So props to Kansas. It was a great game to see 2 blue bloods in college basketball. Obviously some people are sad to see Coach K go out that way, but there's a lot of people that just hate Duke. So cool to see Carolina get it. And look, Hubert Davis, incredible job to have a first-year coach get his team to a national championship. He had a bunch of players play well. They weren't maybe as talented as Kansas was, but great national championship in my opinion. Baseball season starting. I'm excited for that. Lots of what ifs, lots of players moving around, lots of big money players moving around. So Obviously, I'm looking forward to the start of baseball so we can start getting into that. The NBA is getting near the playoffs, so looking forward to that. So lots of stuff happening on the horizon. It's even crazier stuff happening with college or with pro football, all the free agency that's happening still and coaches moving around. So lots of stuff still happening. Wanted to use my 2 cents this week on college basketball because it's the last time we're going to really talk about college basketball for a while. So props to Kansas on their national championship. And let's get to my interview with pro sports card collector and Syracuse basketball nut, Jimmy Estruch. Welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. What's going on? My guest today is Jimmy Estruch. He is a sports cards and memorabilia collector and broker. He has a company he's built solely online called Retro Boomin. So it's on Instagram at retro.boomin, no G on the end. And he is just a broker, sports card collector. He actually was a former basketball player at junior college. He also coached a little bit, and he spent a lot of time at Syracuse being one of the coaches and trainers at the Syracuse Basketball Camps in New York. So we talk a lot about sports cards, college basketball, a little bit of Syracuse stuff at the end, but how he got into the business, the sports cards world, all the stuff that he does, what he looks for. So really cool episode, fun episode with Jimmy. He's a great guy. So you guys will definitely enjoy this one. As always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check that out. It's just Too Tall Sports Podcast. Subscribe, like, share, leave a comment. Would love to hear from you. Give the feedback, share it with a friend. Hit the bell notification if you want to get notified every time we drop an episode, which is Thursday mornings. I drop them about 5 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube. On the audio side, same thing, Apple, Spotify. You can now hit 5 stars on Spotify. So if you listen on there, find my show, Too Tall Sports Podcast, hit the 5-star. It'd really help out a lot. Subscribe, share, follow it, whatever you got to do. Apple, same thing. As always, scroll down on the episodes page. Hit the 5 stars if you have a chance to do so. You're already there. You might as well just hit, hook me up with a 5-star. That'd be great because it's 5-star content. We know this. So if you haven't done so already, do those things. That would be awesome. I'm also on TikTok for the younger crowd. I do lots of fun videos on there and more opinionated sports stuff, kind of like my 2 cents segment. So I do a lot of stuff on TikTok. I also repost them on Instagram as well. So at Too Tall Sports Podcast, that's where you can find it. As always, thank you for listening. And let's get to the interview with Jimmy Estruch. All right, welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. My next guest is a sports card and memorabilia broker and collector. He's has a huge social media presence that has grown tremendously in the last few years, and you can follow him at retro.boomin on Instagram. He is also a part-time basketball coach and trainer. He's from the Western New York area and a big-time Syracuse basketball fan. He is Jimmy Estruch. What's going on, Jimmy?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. Glad to have you on.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I look forward to spending a few minutes with you talking about, sports and some of the collectible aspect as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. Glad to have you. And I was looking at your Instagram before the show, and some of the people you've taken pictures with is pretty cool, and like some royalty in basketball, guys like John Thompson, Patrick Ewing, the Georgetown legend. You got Jim Boeheim, of course, from Syracuse, Jay Billis, Ray Allen, all kinds of people and big time coaches. Tony Bennett, I saw as well, Virginia coach. Tell us what it's been like during your basketball journey, just in that sense, to meet all these big time names in basketball.
It's really been a blessing to be able to meet a lot of these guys and learn from them. I've been fortunate enough to, kind of grow up in, basketball. And so I kind of started as far as working camps at Syracuse University for Coach Boeheim. And then, from there, I reached out to some other, kind of associated camps and asked if they need people to help work camps. And that's what kind of opened the door. One thing led to another. And, I just started building my, summer schedule around these camps. That's kind of the nice thing about, having the flexibility doing what I do. I can kind of create my own schedule. So, before I knew it, I was pretty much booked from the end of May until, mid-August, pretty much when kids went back to school, traveling all over, like you said, from Syracuse, Virginia, down to Jay Billis's camp in Charlotte, DC for Georgetown, and just all over. So, being able to learn from that caliber, of people and coaches has been, like I said, I've been really fortunate, and being able to kind of translate that into the card and memorabilia world has been, kind of a fun way to interact with sports and business as well. So.
Sure. Tell us about the connection with Syracuse, because I think your dad was affiliated somehow, right?
Yeah, when I grew up, like I said, kind of, I live about an hour and a half from Syracuse. So I grew up, being a Syracuse fan, and my dad worked the camps growing up. So I started going to the camps. His dad worked them, and then, basically as time went on, and then, going through high school, and then, going into college. Once getting out of college, realizing I kind of wanted to stay in the coaching field, or at least, in that kind of realm of things. So, I talked to my dad about going back and being able to start to maybe possibly work camps again. So I went back. I think it was probably about 10, 12 years ago now at this point, almost. Went back, started working camps there, and like I said, they have 3 sessions, so I typically work all 3 sessions at Syracuse. So I'd spent a lot of time, in central New York there. So,
Sure.
they have a lot of, really great guys that do work the camp that, like I said, they work a ton of different camps all over the country. And so, that, like I said, really got my foot in the door as far as just meeting a lot of good connections, in the basketball world and in the
Sure.
coaching world. So, yeah, no, that definitely got me, my foot in the door for sure.
Yeah. And I want to talk about your basketball career, actually. So you did play high school and some college. What kind of player were you when you were growing up, like during those years? And then what made you decide which college you were going to go play at?
Growing up, I, was always into sports, always into, basketball, and, being from Western New York, there's really not much else to do in the wintertime besides, basketball. So that's kind of the nice thing. And so basketball is big around here, even at the, high school level, there's a lot of pride as far as, like from, your high school team and where you went. So, I started out, basically right here in Western New York, and then just went to a small private school growing up. And then I actually transferred to my local high school for my senior year. And then we actually won we're sectional champions my senior year, and I was MVP of the sectional tournament.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then from there, I just went to a small community college nearby, GCC. And then, pretty much, like I said, transitioned from there into the coaching world, just kind of started slow and, just started working camps. I kind of transitioned from that I went back and coached at my alma mater at Perry Central, coached the JV team and was the varsity assistant for a couple of years. And then once I started Retro Boomin, I, kind of, put that on the back burner for now and put all my time and focus and energy into this for basically the last 2.5, 3 years or so. So
Sure.
At this point, that's kind of where I've transitioned from like the coaching aspect into kind of more of the business world side of it. But as time goes on, I can definitely see myself getting back into the coaching world for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you did start working camps as a young kid. So you were used to and hearing a lot of instruction from big time people and being around former players and stuff like that. So did you always kind of see yourself as a potential coach as you grew up?
Yeah, I think as I kind of got older, into high school, I think I realized that would definitely be like a strong possibility. I enjoy, teaching the game, basketball. So I think, that's kind of one of my passions for sure. Besides, sports cards and business is probably, obviously coaching. So I enjoy teaching others, especially about basketball and kind of seeing players develop and get better, especially players that want to get better, and put the time and work in, and you can actually kind of see them blossom and see the results, fruits of their labor, per se. But
yeah, no, that's awesome. So then how did all of a sudden, like, where did the whole collectible world come into play for you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And as far as collecting goes, I started, back when I was probably 10, 12 years old. Kind of when eBay first got big, buying a lot of, wasn't much into, I collected sports cards some, but I was much more into the memorabilia side, like autographed baseballs, bats, jerseys,
Sure.
Stuff like that. My dad and I every summer would go on take Amtrak train, go around the country and try and see like 3 or 4 baseball parks, major league parks every summer. So we did that from like 7 years old to 12. So we have like
Nice.
3 or 4 parks left that we got to see. And then, we've seen them all. So basically, that kind of, we'd collect balls at games. We'd want to get foul balls. We'd want to get balls signed after the game, before the game. So that honestly kind of like got my foot in the door and kind of ignited my love for collecting. I knew, just something. It's the same feeling I had back then is the same feeling I have now when I collect certain things. It's just exciting, when you get in, like for me, it's much more card related now, but you get a game used item or something that a player's been a part of, and you can kind of feel that connection. It's just exciting, kind of the same way I felt when I was 10, 12 years old. So that's kind of how I got started. And then more so into the card world, about 3 years ago, I started, just kind of, I went through my old cards, just like a lot of people did. They had some time on their hands and went through some cards, and I bought a couple large, collections. Wasn't much value in them, but it was a good learning lesson because I looked a lot of stuff up, learned about like grading companies, learned about condition, learned about, what makes cards valuable, and the supply and demand aspect as well. So, I started doing that, and then I kind of realized, I started buying and selling like some vintage Star Wars and things like that. So kind of dabbled in, with the vintage toys some, and then kind
Okay.
of realized the upside of being able to buy and sell sports cards, just being able to, ship an item and have it fit in a small flat rate box versus having to move all these large toys and things like that that are kind of cumbersome. So,
Yeah.
and then, when the pandemic hit, that's kind of when the stock market boomed. People had extra money in their accounts, they had extra time on their hands, so they weren't really going out spending money like they usually did. There's nowhere to spend money. So,
Right.
and I think a lot of it too was, mom and dad or whoever had time on their hands. They started cleaning out their closets and realized, oh, I got a couple bins of cards, and they do the same thing. They look them up, they see what's valuable. Some people had really valuable stuff sitting in their closets they didn't know they had.
Yeah.
And that's what created a lot of this card boom that happened. Not just the extra money that was in the economy, but
Sure.
also a lot of people had good stuff lying around that they didn't realize was good. And so I think prices realized a little bit helped. And then, a lot of those parents that had those collections have kids now. So, those 10, 12, 14-year-olds all of a sudden are into collecting now too, so
Right.
it's
And
kind
you
of.
had the NFT boom happen at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
exactly. And it almost, there's definitely a lot of people that were in the card boom that kind of crossed over into the NFT boom. It's kind of interesting how that, kind of like happened. There's definitely a lot of people that were very aware of both kind of happening,
sure.
so.
So then so it's one thing to be a collector, but then it's another thing to start a whole business around it. So how did you go
Right.
from I like collecting memorabilia to I'm going to be now a broker, not only sell my own stuff, but I'm going to broker deals and do consignment. So tell us about that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. So, I started out, like you said, kind of on the collection side, more so just, trying to find good deals of like, I used to like Derek Jeter a lot. So I was trying to find like Jeter rookies, not necessarily super valuable, but like, I want to just, amass a large collection of his. And then I kind of
Yeah.
realized by doing so what cards were valuable of Jeter's rookies. And then I started to kind of chase those cards. And then one thing led to another, and I was selling some to try and profit to go and buy more Jeters. So that kind of started it, and then I realized that this was a possibility to, maybe make money on like a part-time level. So that's kind of what I started doing, and just buying, selling my own items. As far as, cards I find on Facebook or on Instagram. And then I just really started building my Instagram, pretty much hard 2.5 years ago. And we're up to almost 65,000 followers so far. So, it's been a lot of work. People ask like, what do you do? How do you do it? But honestly, it's been, every day I'm always doing something to reach new people. You know what I mean? Like even getting on your podcast, like that, I enjoy reaching, just new people, like,
Sure.
and maybe some of them will, follow me, ask questions about cards, and I'm able to help them with maybe some of the questions they had, or someone that was curious that never really quite knew. And now maybe they'll, get back into cards or go through that collection they have in their closet. Maybe there is something in one of your listeners, closets that
Oh
might,
yeah, I got stuff too.
that might pay for their kids college or something. So
Which is crazy to
that'd
think
be
about, like it's just a lot of these cards there's a whole new crop of cards that are out there now with obviously all the young players that are out now, but it's just like, man, like, these one of ones or whatever. It's some of the stuff is pretty crazy how much it's worth.
it is. It's it's a little bit mind boggling to see some of these prices that they're going for at auction, and to think, people are becoming millionaires off of pieces of cardboard. It's
Right.
just, I tell my friend the other day, I'm like, to think, in high school that this would be my full-time job, is buying and selling, sports cards or, memorabilia items. It's just like, I never would have believed you. You know what I mean? So, and then, like you said, I've kind of been able to, as business has picked up, and thankfully, with my following, I've been able to have good success at buying and selling, on there on Retro Boom and on Instagram. I've kind of moved into the broker/consignment side of things, where I've been able to, kind of help people move items that maybe they don't have the ability to, or they don't have as large of an audience maybe to get the eyes on it that they want. And it's kind of a nice thing where most consigners don't do, is I really only do it with, trusted clients that I've previously done deals with or have, references or vouchers for. But typically what they'll do is they won't even have to ship me the item. They just send me a picture basically of the card front and back, or of the item.
Yeah.
And then, I put it in front of my, private sellers, or excuse me, my private buyers, and then on my Instagram as well. And then I do the negotiating for them, and then they let me know obviously what they want for an asking price and a floor price. And then they get paid first, which is way different than most consignments run. Usually the consignor gets the money first, and then he takes his cut, and then he sends it to the actual seller, which I have the buyer and the seller directly pay, each other there.
Oh,
So they
wow.
get the money. So the seller gets their money first, and then they send me the percentage that we agreed upon. And then the percentage is typically just based on the value of the card. And I'm pretty negotiable about that. I'm fair. But I usually try and make it work for everyone involved. But, honestly, since January 1st of this year, that's what I've basically been focusing on. So, I still do a lot of buying and selling of my own, inventory as well, but I've transitioned pretty heavily into kind of like the broker consignment side as well, just being able to be that trusted party for both sides.
So you're taking kind of a big risk here, even though you're trusted and they're nice, clients of yours. You're still waiting on your cut for brokering that deal.
Exactly. That's the biggest risk, and that's why consigners don't really do it,
Yeah.
because, say if I'm owed $5,000 and all of a sudden Bob decides to not send me my 5,000,
What are you
there's
going
really
to do?
not much I can do at that point, and it's like, I don't really get into, some consigners have the people that they sell items for sign like a legal document,
I was going to say
and
like a
which,
contract or
like a
something.
contract. But, like, to be honest, I mean, the way I do things, like I said, I want to do it with people I trust anyways. So, if I've done thousands of
Sure.
dollars in transactions with them, I guess I'm kind of old school in that aspect, where,
It's a handshake deal.
it's a handshake deal, and it's like,
Hey, if it's
yeah,
working, why not? I get it.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's like, I'm very careful, and I kind of have a pretty good vetting process of
Sure.
who I use and allow. But I mean, worst case scenario, I sell a card for free. It's not like I'm out of any money. I just obviously wouldn't do business for them again, So at
Right.
the end of the day, it's like I'm selling a card pro bono,
Yeah.
but
Good
if
for
that
you
ever did
though,
happen.
because
But
yeah, I mean, you built, like you said, over 60,000 followers on Instagram, which is in the last few years is not easy to do. And the
yeah,
fact that you have private buyers now that trust you is also
right.
really cool. So that's awesome. You've been able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, for sure.
We've talked about this a little bit pre-show. How come? Because I had just want to mention this. I had Tone Stakes, who has a company called Game Used Tone, and he focuses on game used apparel, whether it's shoes, jerseys, headbands, wristbands, whatever it is, hats, gloves, bats, whatever it is. But those items don't seem to move as well as cards do. So tell me why you think sports cards are more valuable or popular than actual game used one of one items.
That's a great question. So I'm one of those that actually, thinks a lot of the memorabilia side of things, especially like you're talking about the game used items, the super unique, the true one of one items, like a jersey from Jordan's rookie year that's signed. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, you don't really get much more one of one than and it's
Yeah.
a full jersey that he played in, so those will go for a couple 100,000, but then meanwhile, Jordan will have a card that's got, an autograph of his and maybe just a piece of a jersey from a playoff game, and it'll sell for 800,000, or
Right.
even, you know what I'm saying? And so that discrepancy of like, well, I could just have gone and bought 4 of his actual rookie jerseys that he played and signed for the same price that someone just bought that card from, or excuse me, card for. It is a little I guess, confusing, especially from like the outside looking in, if you don't really understand the card market.
Right.
And I guess the best way to explain it, is I guess just simply supply and demand. I mean, the people making a market, you know what I mean? So as far as like sometimes what we think maybe are undervalued may not be as undervalued as we think, or maybe they are and they just haven't been realized yet. So maybe 2-3 years from now, which I think we've already started to see some increase in prices of some of those game used items. I think people are slowly starting to respect it a little bit more. But I do agree. I mean, I just find it kind of crazy how some of these jerseys are going for a quarter or an eighth of the price of a card, that's of that player. And there's more than one of, that part is definitely understandable from an outside perspective. But
I think it's crazy, man. I don't get it. Like, you got an actual game worn jersey from Michael Jordan. Like, how much more real does it get than that,
Right. And the other thing is to, we're in such a LeBron crazed era, of like this younger generation that like the MJ stuff too is almost getting not in less in demand, but like from the younger side, they don't really want a jersey anyways, because they're gonna hang it up in their closet maybe, or maybe they'll get like it framed nicely and put it in their, but like the millennials and I'm one of them, like there's not like a huge demand for like stuff like that to go put up in your man cave. You know what I'm saying?
They
like,
want the small items.
They would rather have the small items. And I think honestly, that's why NFTs have been such big hits with the younger side, because their portfolio and their collection is just on their phone, or like other people can just go access it and check out, hey, this is what Jimmy has in his NFT portfolio.
Yeah.
And it's almost a way of like socially flaunting your success and wealth, where I guess, I don't fully, agree necessarily with it, but I guess that's where the younger mindset's going, as far as, they'd rather have a sports card they can carry in a small case, or an NFT, on their phone, than having, I guess, a jersey that, they'll have in their closet, or I guess hanging in their man cave or whatever.
But I'll still never understand it, man, but you got to follow the money. So it's not worth fighting it anyway.
Right. And that's what I try and tell people, like, especially like some of the older people, they just get so frustrated. And I'm like, well, the market's the market. Like, as much as we want to fight it, and sometimes it's crazy, but who are the people buying it? You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And sometimes, like you said, there may be an undervalued item that, 1-2 years down the road, you're right. Maybe that Jordan rookie jersey does end up being $1 million jersey one day, which I think a lot of that stuff will, especially as time goes on and they realize just how few of those items are truly out there.
Right.
And how many things were just fake is the other thing with Jordan. Is like there's so much fake Jordan like memorabilia and autographs out there. It's just ridiculous.
I see. Okay.
I feel like in the 80s, 90s, there was just a ton of forgeries. So that's the other thing you got to kind of be careful for as well. So
So you got guys now, like the young guys. I was going to ask you who kind of are the popular items or cards right now. So you got guys like Luka, Ja Morant, Giannis, even LeBron still. Who are you seeing the biggest push for right now in the card space?
Right now, well, 100% Ja Morant, for sure. Just because the way he's been playing has been just remarkable.
Right.
He's exciting. He plays hard. He's fast. He's got passion. He shoots decently, and it's just like you never can really say anything against his effort, which is cool.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. So people
he's a better version of what Westbrook is, in my opinion. He's a Westbrook that can shoot better. He's a little better at decision making, and he's way younger, obviously, too. That's the other thing. And he's he did so much winning too at Murray State and so much scoring. Like that stuff does make a difference. Like that definitely makes a player much more confident when you have success like that previously. It's like you have a little bit more faith in yourself because he won with a smaller school on such a big stage, against a lot of tough teams. So Ja Morant's probably the most in demand right now. Obviously that's just, pretty much based a lot of how he's playing right now.
Sure.
And that's how I explain it to a lot of people. Like, it's a lot like fantasy sports, where it's like, I don't personally play fantasy sports, but I'll buy rookie cards of guys that are, playing, in the season or next season, in the hopes that maybe a Luka has a good season. So I'll buy him in the off season when they're lower, or like that Ja's going to have a breakout season. So maybe I'll buy him in the off season and then sell him during the season. And it's kind of like, you pick your players in fantasy, and the better they do, the better you do.
Right.
So it's almost the same way I explain with modern cards. It's very much like fantasy sports. It's based a lot on what have you done for me lately and the performance of the player, versus where a lot of the veteran stuff, or like even LeBron stuff at this point, is pretty safe as far as like price wise. Like,
yeah,
he's played 20 years or whatever in the league, unless he does something, horrific, like off the court, like his stuff's really not going to be affected that much, So,
well, you
yeah,
also have the other side too, because you got like a guy like Zion, who is a total, like, just like fantasy, it's a lot of luck involved.
100%.
And you get a guy like Zion who's a phenom, but then all of a sudden it's hurt and isn't playing anymore. His stuff, his value goes way down.
Way down. And there's a lot of guys right now that are, holding their breath, praying that Zion can come back and play good somewhere, because I know tons of people that have spent over 6 figures on Zion cards. And it's just like sometimes more than 6 figures on one card. When some of his product was getting released, when there was so much hype for him his rookie year, there was definitely lots of cards in the 6 figures. So people pull out these cards now and they get excited for Zion, when they pull a Zion, and I tell them, I'm like, well, how long are we going to do that for? You know what I mean? It's like, you should be getting more excited when they pull out a Ja Morant, which they are, they're getting, because
you just never know though, some of these guys.
Right. And it's like, if someone would have said that 2 years ago, that Ja Morant stuff would be worth more than Zion's right now, or at least a lot of the stuff is, they wouldn't believe you.
Right.
You know what I mean? They'd be like, no way. But
especially when Zion was at Duke too. It's like, he is just unbelievable, right? He's on the big stage. This is the next,
he was just so explosive, and he was just exciting to watch. And I mean, I hope he comes back healthy.
Same here.
And plays, because the NBA is more exciting with a healthy Zion. And you know what I mean? It's like, so like, I don't really wish, especially like young guys, it's like, it's hard, don't really want to wish bad upon, like, he seems like a decent dude. He may be doing some immature things. Maybe I don't really know what's going on. Who actually knows what's going on, like behind the scenes, So it's
I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think he's hurt, and it's unfortunate.
And I think people overreact over every little, tweet that comes out. Like, it's like, oh, now he's allowed to go back to New Orleans. It's like people are, freaking out. So it's like, I don't know. It's just, I hope he comes back and plays good. It's like, because he's just unreal. There's not a player in the league like him when he's healthy. His second bounce too is just unreal. The way he gets up on his second jump is just
as incredible. Small as he is, man. Like, wow, he just gets up. Like, it's crazy,
and it's quick. So. But,
I did want to ask you about how you got the name Retro Boomin. How did you come up with that? And what was the inspiration there?
Some people that are familiar with, like, the music producer Metro Boomin, will kind of see the comparison there. But, the retro side, started kind of like with me when I started, flipping, retro toys and kind of like the vintage items. And I do own a lot of vintage cards as well. So I guess that would still technically be retro. But I was discussing it with my friend, and I was thinking like Metro Boomin, and I was kind of thinking of play on words, some different names, and I'm like, I got Retro Boomin, and it's kind of like retro, the old school, and then Boomin, like
it's Boomin now. I love it, man. That's a perfect name.
So I'm not super creative, believe me, but
that's great.
One time where I had a creative moment, coming up with a name, and so I went with it, and people like it, it makes them laugh, kind of,
for sure. And I love the video game letters.
Yeah,
and that's great.
That was my other thing too. I'm like, I kind of want to incorporate it with like the kind of Nintendo / video game, like that retro, as far as like the font goes. So yeah,
I love it.
I've just kind of been going with it, and people enjoy it. So why not?
That's
and it's
great.
kind of, people remember that name too. It's not like it's just so and so's card shop. It's like, retro
Jimmy's
Boomin.
Cards. Yeah,
exactly. Not put anyone down, I guess, that has that name, but it's like, this is, I guess, a little bit more memorable when people remember Retro Boomin. But.
Now, speaking of booming, how long do you think this quote unquote boom of sports cards and memorabilia that we've just seen, this huge explosion over the pandemic, where do you see it going from here?
I think we've already seen a large correction so far already in collectibles, which I honestly, in any type of market, healthy market, you're gonna see corrections. Stock market, gold, everything. It doesn't matter what type of investment, there are corrections. And like I said, that's a sign of a healthy market. So I think we've already experienced a pretty decent major correction where there was a lot of like overpriced base cards. For people that don't know, base is obviously like the most popular in a set. So there's the most of them out there. So people were getting, $500-$600 for a base card, where now people are realizing the population is so high on them, it's really not that valuable. So now some of them are only worth like maybe 150, $200, So I think we've seen that correction, where maybe it's some education that has happened as far as in the market, as far as the industry kind of learning and smartening up. It is a fairly new market as far as like the investment side or the making
Right,
money
because
part
sports
of
cards have been
sports
around
card.
forever, as you know, but it's
Right.
almost like we took a 30-year break from people caring about sports cards, and now we
did.
care again.
Yeah, it's very true. Like the early 90s, it kind of stopped, and
Yeah.
because of that, basically what happened is the NBA Players Association and the NFL and MLB Players Association, what they did is they gave licenses to Fleer, Leaf, Topps,
yeah.
Every Don Russ had
Ultra.
their own brand, Ultra. So what happened was, like, a player, Ken Griffey, comes out and he doesn't have one or two rookies. He has like 8 right away from these 8 different companies. You know what I mean? So now all of a sudden, mom and pop as a consumer, when they go buy cards for their son, now all of a sudden they have 7 different options to choose from. So obviously, like, what happens is that they just overpopulated the market, and so basically all 7 got a little bit of a piece of the pie and none of them made it, basically. Instead of, like, now what they have is Panini is licensed to make NBA cards and NFL cards, and then Topps currently has the license for MLB, which obviously, if you've seen in the news, Fanatics is kind of taking over brands as far as in the next 3 or 4 years, they'll be taking over and producing and owning the license actually on all 3. So we'll see what happens there.
So you're saying in the 90s, there was too much inventory that they just totally saturated the market. And now at this point, there's targeted, or one company is only doing one sport at a time.
Correct. Yep. The NBA Players Association, like an NFL Player Association and MLB, they only awarded one company for each sport. But Panini essentially got awarded both sports for NBA and NFL, and then Topps still has baseball. And then Upper Deck actually still has hockey. That's right. Too. They do hockey.
Upper Deck has hockey? Okay.
Yeah, and they do some golf sets as well, depending on like who they have licensed with them. But they're still around. Yep.
Okay. Crazy, man. It's weird. And I think, like, some of the stuff I have, I'm like, oh, I got a great Jordan card, or I got like a Shaq or a Kobe something, and they're like, nah, it's not really worth that much. I'm like, how is this possible? It's from the 90s, like legit card. And like, no, not worth. I was like, what? So I was going to ask you, how do you, not that you have to give away all your secrets, of course.
No,
how do you look up where the trends are and what's valuable and what's not?
Sure. I mean, to be honest, a lot of people, they'll pull up a card, and I got a Kobe card right here.
There you go.
And they'll pull up something like this, and they'll see what like a PSA 10 sells for, right? And keep in mind, there's maybe only 450 of these in the world in PSA 10. But there's been 10,000 of them that have been graded. So just think about the percentage, So everyone thinks when they first get into cards, oh my goodness, this Kobe card's worth $5,000. I need to grade it. But really, if you fine tune, go through it and look at the corners, the thing is with grading, you can't be biased, with yourself. Like, if you see a soft corner, it's a soft corner. Don't just try and overlook it because you want it to be a 10, and then you send it for grading and it comes back a 6, and you're like, why? And it's like, well, it's like, well, you can't lie to yourself. That's the biggest thing. So,
I was going to ask you about that, raw cards versus getting them graded. What's so important about getting them graded for people that don't know about that?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a great question. So, like, the important thing is like kind of like what I was just talking about. So if I looked at this card and I said, this is in excellent condition, but you look at it and you say it's in fair condition, right? It's your word versus mine. It's much harder to negotiate a price for this card, right?
Sure.
But if I send this to PSA and it comes back a PSA 10 or a PSA 9, I can now go to the sold prices on eBay or the sold prices on one of the auction sites, okay? And I can see what the last 10, 15 sold for in the last couple of months, and I get a good idea of what this card is really worth in a PSA, 9 or 10. So now that I know what the value of a PSA 9 or 10 is, I'm able to we're both able to negotiate much, I guess, closer to what the true value of the card is. Okay. And I guess then it just becomes down more to how much do you want to sell the card for exactly what it's worth? Do you want to maybe give the guy a little bit of space depending on how much you're into it? And that just all comes into personal preference and what your situation is and how much you're into the card.
Got it. Okay.
That's the biggest thing, for, I guess, buying and selling purposes. And then the other nice thing is it's encapsulated, so it's protected. So if it say if a folder or something falls on it, it's not going to be able to bend a corner or damage the surface or anything like that because it's in a protected case. Yeah, the cases are plastic, so if it's dropped hard enough, it'll break, but that's a little different. But that way, at least it's protected as well. Yeah.
Now, I think we talked pre-show about this. You don't do any card pack openings like people like to do on camera?
I did one like a couple of years ago, or like a year and a half ago now, for my followers, and I just personally don't really. I mean, I don't mind opening them. It's fun, exciting. Don't get me wrong, opening the packs. But then after you open the packs, you have to organize them all. You have to sleeve them. You have to ship them, and that is super meticulous. And I just don't have the patience, obviously, to do that. So
sure. I just laugh when some people do that and they come up with nothing. It's hilarious. So, they get nothing out of the pack.
And it happens. And I tell people it's called card breaking. It's just like gambling, to be honest. So if you go into it with, I'm gonna throw $100 in this break and there's a chance I don't get anything, and that's fine. It's like if you were to go to the casino, I guess, and bet it on red, but at least this way, there's a chance you might get some cards, for your $100, but yeah, I mean, there's a good chance when you do these breaks that you're not going to hit anything or hit the amount of money that it costs to get into the break,
Gotcha.
So, but then there's those guys that hit a card that's life changing, and it's like,
those are the ones those are the ones they post about.
I was just going to say, that's why they post those, it's all marketing, it's like anything else. Why do the casinos post the winners? It's like they don't post the guys that are going in there every day losing, that are upset at life. But, so it's kind of interesting to see how that's taken off, though. I mean, it's a huge industry, breaking. I mean, it's huge. Guys are making, literally, companies are making millions of dollars just breaking cards. Think about that is another thing that's just crazy. But that's just not something I really enjoy doing. Not knocking anyone that does it, but I just enjoy more of the buying and selling aspect and kind of the brokerage and consignment services that I offer now more than anything, just because I can do it from anywhere. I don't have to be attached to a computer, and then I don't have to ship out 1,000 packages and then worry about 1,000 tracking numbers. And that's just not my thing. I'd rather just deal with one or two higher end items, sell them, get them shipped, and then go from there, so.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I did want to transition a little bit to talk some hoops. Now we got to talk some college basketball.
Yeah,
obviously, for sure. Huge Syracuse basketball fan.
They played good, and that was without Buddy. So Buddy got suspended.
Yeah, Buddy decided to punch somebody in the stomach.
I was going to say, a great time for him to start throwing haymakers, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good kid,
I'm sure.
He just had a bad moment there.
But what I didn't like is you got his dad, Jim Boeheim, saying, "Oh, it was inadvertent," or it wasn't. Yeah. I'm like, Jim, come on, dude.
Especially when the
son
already, especially when the son already came out with an apology, like admitting what he did was wrong. And then he got
Boeheim's like, "Well, you saw it differently than me." No, Jim. No.
Right. It's like that's pretty much a punch, no matter where you are. Like,
I do want to talk to you about Boeheim, though. Like, obviously, he's a legendary coach. He's coached Team USA basketball. Like, he's been around a very long time. He got the one championship with Melo back in 2001. Like, okay, but I know you're a huge Syracuse fan. However, would you say at this point it's time for Jim Boeheim to move on?
Yeah, I mean, he says there's a plan in place, so I don't know what that exactly means. I think he's kind of starting to realize, not saying he can't coach anymore, but like, it definitely takes a lot of energy to motivate guys. You got to be, you got to recruit, and I think, not saying he's too hard on guys, but I think sometimes some of these players see the way they get chewed out when they come out of games, and with these younger players, like they honestly, they're very, I want to say not sensitive, but you really can't.
More fragile.
They're a little more fragile, and
he's coaches, old school, and he sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
That's like that old school way. That is the game isn't like that anymore.
It isn't, and it's just tough. I mean, I think. And that's why I think you see some of these players transfer out second year from Syracuse, because it's like, a lot of these guys too, he just doesn't play that I think should be getting minutes. And now that like Edwards was hurt, some of these guys on the bench are playing. And I think he's realizing like they do serve, a purpose out there. I mean, like we should have probably been playing them more throughout the season. So when we got into ACC tournament time, they have some experience, but now it's unfortunate they were just a little bit too green. And, I think there are a lot of freshmen coming in next year. So it'll be interesting to see how long he stays. He said he's definitely staying for next year. Do I think maybe after next year he retires? Yeah, probably, especially if they have a decent season next year. I think that's what he's kind of hoping for.
And how long is his son Buddy going to be there?
About 7 years, who knows? It's like, no, but they said
I can
Buddy,
see him getting his kid through college.
right? Yeah, and supposedly Buddy isn't coming back, but Jimmy might, because Cornell didn't play at all the year of the pandemic.
Oh, Jimmy is his other son?
Yeah, Jimmy's the other
Okay.
son that's on the team.
Okay.
He's actually the older son,
Right.
but he didn't play, obviously, the pandemic year. But then the Ivy League didn't have a season; they canceled the whole season. So he has that year of eligibility, and he actually technically has last year's of eligibility too, because they gave that as like a pandemic waiver. So potentially he can play again. But so I don't know if he's going to come back, but I supposedly Buddy's not coming back at all, but Jimmy might come back. So we'll see what happens.
Gotcha. Okay. So we talked about this a little bit also, that Syracuse plays a zone and it doesn't translate to the NBA that much. And also Syracuse used to be in the 2000s, a program that you wouldn't have to sell as much. Like this was a powerhouse college basketball program. The Big East was on fire then, UConn, Georgetown, like all these schools were still great before they broke up the Big East. But what do you think about the way people view Syracuse now versus it was like, oh, Syracuse in the 2000s was the school you want to play at?
Yeah, I do think some of I hate to keep saying these younger kids, but the younger generation, I think it kind of has forgotten about the Mellow Championship. And like you said, that was back in the early 2000s. So a lot of these kids were just being born, if they were even born yet, so it's almost like the LeBron Jordan debate. I think the reason why LeBron gets so much greatest of all time debate is because most kids right now that are growing up never got to witness Jordan playing in his prime, and just to kind of like witness what he was able to do and how clutch he truly was, so I don't blame it all on them, but some of it's just, you got to do a little bit more homework, so it's just, it's a different generation, like you were saying, and it'll be interesting to kind of see what happens in this transition process with Coach Boeheim. So
I did bring up, I guess I didn't really talk about the zone much. So basically they're not playing man-to-man, so it doesn't translate to the NBA.
Right.
And they've had a lot of talented players come to Syracuse and they just totally flop in the NBA.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
And I think that's a great point you bring up. When they practice the zone every single day. They play the zone every single day. So when all of a sudden you have to guard guys that are better than you were guarding in college, but now you got to guard them and stop them one-on-one. And in the NBA, they have so many rules about helping out and stuff like that.
Illegal defense or whatever.
Illegal defenses and whatnot. So it's like you really have to be able to stop your guy one-on-one, because there's not that help out behind you that's gonna be there. It's not like there's a help defense like there is in high school and college. Like you have to stop your guy, and that's what I think happens to a lot of these guys. They don't know how to guard guys one-on-one. And unfortunately, you just really haven't seen a lot of Syracuse guys have success at the next level, besides Melo, obviously, but he was only there 1 year. So, and it's funny you say that, because they actually started the Duke game today in like a triangle and two. So it's like way out of whack, like at least he did try and switch it up, and they had success because, Duke obviously assumed they were coming out in a 2-3, and they came out in something different. And it really did kind of like, for the first like 8-10 minutes, Duke was like, had no idea how to react, because they didn't talk about it. They didn't practice it. So, it's like all of a sudden now we got a new game plan, which, I think maybe they should do that more often, switch it up a little bit. Or a few years ago, they did start to play a little man-to-man, but they kind of got away with it. And now they're back to just playing all zone. So I think it definitely hurts players though in the NBA, in the draft, as far as, I think scouts realize that too. Like now I think unfortunately they see a guy from Syracuse and they're like, oh, he can't play defense, just because maybe that's how, most of the guys that come out, they not necessarily can't play defense. They just haven't learned.
They haven't learned it.
They haven't, think about it. If you haven't done something in 4 years and all of a sudden now you got to do it and on a high level, it's like, oh man, it's good. Especially when you're doing it like the NBA combine, where these guys are going at you at 100%. It's like, they're competing for a spot in the draft. So it's like, they're going to exploit every weakness you have and they don't care. So it's like, Yeah, no, I think that's definitely kind of hurt, the Syracuse athletes over time for sure.
Yes. What are your thoughts on, obviously, things could change by the time this episode comes out, but thoughts on like the parity in college basketball? Maybe, like you got teams like Gonzaga, Purdue, you got obviously Kansas, Kentucky are back in at Duke and those schools, but you got other big time schools that are making a push, and it's not so much. I honestly have no clue who's going to win it all this year. All these top 10 seeds, as you saw that a couple weekends ago, I think, or all the top 6 all lost, like Auburn
Right.
and all these schools. What are your thoughts on the parity in college basketball now?
No, I think it's cool because, at any night, these teams can win. And I think it's a lot to do with the coaches. I think you see a lot of quality coaches. I mean, you see it happen all the time. These schools will come out of nowhere. The coach leads the team to a Sweet 16, and the next year they get a contract somewhere else for 10x what they were getting paid.
Right.
Like the coach at Wichita State, you've seen it all over. The coach, what's Hurley that went from UB to Arizona State now or whatever. So you just see it all over the place. It's like all of a sudden they kind of make their name in March, and they go from being a nobody to somebody, real quick in March. So it's interesting, and I don't know. I just think it's fun to watch when there isn't just like Duke, Kentucky, UConn, like how it always
Carolina
was for years. Carolina. Yeah. It's just kind of cool to see these different teams in, and I think it's cool for the coaches too. It gives them a little different spotlight. It's like these are the actual good coaches, the ones that are doing it on a less of a budget. They're not being able to recruit the top guys, but they're being able to kind of get the most out of them, and find that and doing the best in recruiting, finding the biggest bang for your buck per se. It's like, finding who really can make a difference. And maybe that's getting overlooked right now, by a lot of schools, and they find that diamond in the rough, and all of a sudden, you make a Sweet 16 run. And so it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And also what I've noticed is, even like Coach Cal this year at Kentucky, he has an old roster this year. So that whole one and done thing, you don't really have success in the tournament. Like it's rare that a young team will win in the tournament. It almost doesn't happen. The older teams usually win. So it's interesting to see that strategy now.
Exactly. And it's almost opposite of like we were just talking about, you know what I mean? As far as like, those guys that are successful in the NBA are a lot of times those one and done guys that maybe they weren't even, sometimes they're not even like the best in college, but it's like, they make it through and they get in the NBA and they really find like a team or somewhere that plays to the system or the way they are. And all of a sudden they just flourish, but then you see guys come out of these, no name schools as well, where it's like, they just have the work ethic. And they're able to outwork guys that came out of these like Kentucky's or whatnot, these schools that, some of these guys had one scholarship offer, so they took advantage of it. They went to the one school that offered them a scholarship and just proved everyone wrong. It's like, like someone like Kawhi Leonard. It's like, who'd have ever thought?
Or John Morant at Murray State.
John Morant, Murray State. You know what I mean? You can go
McCollum and Lillard and all these guys.
Right. I was just going to say all of that. Yeah. It's like, they go into the West Coast colleges that have a tenth of the attendance or a tenth of the budget that these major schools in the East do. And they're just able to make a name for themselves. It's like, it's kind of crazy. So no, it's fun. It's fun to watch. And, I think we're definitely going to have a fun March for sure, watching some of these teams. Hopefully we find another John Morant, that comes out of that's kind of the fun thing where it's like all of a sudden, you become a fan of a guy, that's like, you've just never heard of until the tournament, which is kind of cool,
Yeah, so, no, I agree with you. All right. So where can everybody, obviously we've already teased it a little bit, where can everybody find you online and help? Maybe they got cards that you can broker for them. So tell us where they can find you.
Yep, exactly. No, I appreciate that. So our main platform is on Instagram. Like you said already, it's retro.boomin on Instagram. You'll see us there. It's a red and black logo. If you have any questions regarding cards, collectibles, stuff you think you have that's valuable, stuff you think that might be valuable, or maybe you've been thinking about getting into cards and collecting, don't be afraid to reach out, shoot me, give me a follow. I'm very responsive as far as people that shoot me messages. I try and get back to everyone within 24 hours. Like I said, I answer all questions. And then obviously, if you have cards that you think you want me to sell for you, happy to do that. But, in the meantime, I'm happy just to help you out and talk about cards and maybe teach you a thing or two that maybe you didn't know before. And maybe we're able to make you some money in the meantime. So
there we go.
but appreciate it. Reach out and, we'll see what you have.
Yeah, man. Great to have you on. I appreciate you coming on with me, and great to meet you as well. And I'm glad we connected so we can talk some hoops and some cards, man.
Yeah, man, for sure. No, I appreciate it for sure. This has been a good time, and anytime you get to talk about sports and cards, I consider it a win. So can't complain at all.
I got you, man. And if anybody needs help, I can help. Any of my listeners can find Jimmy. I'll make the connection there too. So
appreciate it very much. I appreciate it.
My thanks to Jimmy Estruch. Big props to him for coming on to the show. As he said, follow him at retro.boomin. That's on Instagram. He runs his whole business through there. He's a consignment broker. If you need help, he's a very nice guy. He can help you find the value of your cards or discuss it or whatever you're looking for memorabilia-wise. He can help you with that. Very nice guy. He's open to it. And he can maybe get you some money. If you have some old sports cards or memorabilia hanging around, you're not sure what it's worth, he can help you figure that out. So at retro.boomin to figure that out and find out what he's got going on there. He posts stuff all the time. So my thanks to Jimmy. I appreciate him coming on. As always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. As I always tell you, check out my YouTube channel if you want to watch the interviews. Every Thursday at 5 a.m. Pacific time, I put out the show. So it's either on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, at Too Tall Sports Podcast. Wherever you can, subscribe, rate, review, like it, share it, whatever it is, 5-star if you can. As I always remind you, just find the show, get some more exposure for myself and the Too Tall Sports Podcast. So thank you guys for listening as always, and I'll see you next time for another great episode.